This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. President Trump will meet North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. The announcement came like a bolt from the blue, but experts are crediting the president's tough sanctions on North Korea. Dale Hurd has the story.
After a decades-long standoff on the Korean Peninsula, what the Trump administration has just pulled off has to be called a diplomatic coup. A top official from South Korea delivered the stunning message at the White House Thursday night. Kim Jong Un is promising to stop his nuclear missile tests and wants to meet with President Trump.
And he expressed his eagerness to meet President Trump as soon as possible.
The president accepted the invitation, tweeting, "Great progress being made, but sanctions will remain until an agreement is reached, meeting being planned."
President Trump has said for some time that he was open to talks and he would willingly meet with Kim Jong Un when conditions were right.
North Korea even said U.S. troops can continue joint military exercises with the South, something that would have been unheard of in the past. The surprise invitation came after months of threats and insults between Trump and Kim that had some in the world on edge.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
While Kim ramped up his missile test, the president responded,
"Little rocket man."
The mainstream media and the president's critics portrayed Trump as reckless and dangerous. Now the two clashing leaders could be meeting by May.
Just a couple of months ago, we were talking about, airstrikes and nuclear war and things like that. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, within 2 months, we're talking about, sort of some kind of final deal on the peninsula. So it does look like the president's approach of sort of pressure and talking to the Chinese have worked.
It's a major positive development, clearly moving in the right direction. Now, they could be lying through the teeth like they've been in the past, and when we get into discussions with them, they move in a different direction. That certainly can be the case.
But it seems to be a sign that after decades of North Korean lying and cheating on its nuclear program in order to get money from the West, Trump's tough sanctions finally worked. Secretary of State Tillerson says it will take weeks to arrange the timing of Trump's meeting with Kim, and he said for now the meeting will simply be talks and not negotiations. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Here is a look at some of the other headlines we're following in the CBN newsroom. President Trump has ordered steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, but countries like China and Japan oppose the move. China has accused the president of damaging the global trading system. Trump says the tariffs will protect industries hurt by foreign policies. The new tariffs will take effect in 15 days. Mississippi pro-life advocates have a reason to celebrate. Lawmakers passed a bill banning abortions after 15 weeks. The measure was crafted to protect the life of a fetus in the womb. Governor Phil Bryant says he is eager to sign the bill into law. The CEO of Disney says Joy Behar apologized to Vice President Pence for comments she made on The View. Behar compared Pence's Christian beliefs to mental illness. Michael Iger told shareholders she apologized to the vice president directly. Some critics say the private apology is not enough. And you can find more on these stories at cbnnews.com. Video game violence was front and center at a White House meeting Thursday. It's an issue that hits close to home for President Trump, who said violent images are too easily available to kids like his 11-year-old son, Barron. Ben Kennedy reports from Washington.
Do video games that kids play at home or even on their cell phones lead to gun violence? That's what President Trump hopes to find out.
We're working to harden our schools.
President Trump talked tough on video game violence to leaders of that industry, calling for a meeting on Thursday to understand how video games influence kids.
We're working to strengthen our early warning system so that when there are red flags, as we had in the case in Florida, there were 39 red flags, which is a disgrace.
Trump revived the debate over the link between gun violence and video games in the wake of last month's Florida school shooting, where 17 people were killed. The meeting ended up being closed to the media, but the Parents Television Council was there and shared their concerns with CBN News.
What we need to do is make sure that we have meaningful solutions that can help parents protect their children from these ultraviolet video games, which are basically dress rehearsals for gun slaughter.
Thursday's talks come after Trump sat down with shooting survivors, local leaders, and even state governors to get their take on how to keep schools safe. President Trump says he supports tightening background checks, reopening mental institutions, and is even considering raising the age to buy assault-style weapons. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
An exhibit at the United Nations has the goal of showing archaeological evidence of the ongoing Jewish history in Jerusalem. Breaking Israel News reports the Jerusalem Affairs and Heritage Ministry, along with the Israeli mission to the United Nations, put together the exhibit. It shows a series of UN resolutions that deny Jewish ties to Jerusalem. The news outlet also says the exhibit provides authentic archaeological findings unearthed in Israel and replicas of other historical objects that show how the Jewish people are connected to Israel's capital city. One of the items on display is an inscription from the seal of the biblical king Hezekiah. An Ontario court has ruled a Christian couple's rights were violated when the government closed their home for refusing to tell their foster kids about the Easter Bunny. When the couple told the social worker that telling children in their care the character was real was a violation of their religious beliefs, the girls were then taken away and their foster home was closed. The couple said many people were praying for them and that they saw the hand of God direct the judge in his decision. This week, a Superior Court judge ruled in favor of the Christian couple, saying their rights were violated. Coming up, the Southern Belle who became a CIA agent. One former spy reveals how she saved lives while cracking the terrorist network. This officer shares what she learned while working in the CIA and tells us what's truly worth fighting for. Welcome back. She's a former CIA officer who infiltrated ISIS and led an amazing escape mission. Now she writes about her covert life in the new book, Breaking Cover. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales talked with Michelle Rigby Assad about how her faith led her to become a highly skilled operative.
How do you stop terrorist organizations like ISIS from committing violent attacks in cities like New York City, Times Square? You have to go undercover, infiltrate them, learn how they think and act. And that's what Michelle Rigby Assad did for the CIA.
I spent 10 years as an undercover counterterrorism officer in the CIA. And because my expertise is in the Arab world, the majority of my career was spent in the Middle East region.
That meant Assad and her team, often including her husband, a fellow agent named Joseph, worked against the likes of Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
What's it like to work with these guys side by side? I mean...
Well, it is fascinating. The best schooling in terrorism a person can get is being in front of those guys like that, which going to Iraq for our tour, we're allowed to say that that I and my husband served in Baghdad for a year. We got to interact with those sources and really get to know what they were thinking and where they're coming from. And
what made them tick?
What made them tick? Right, exactly. And which is fascinating because if they'd met you on the street, they'd prefer to cut your head off instead of actually deal with you. But for whatever reason, they've decided, I'm going to work with the CIA to take out other members of my group.
That's all Assad says she can say, but she does add a major hurdle she had to overcome, interrogating these terrorists and being a woman.
For them, I was the opposite of what they were expecting to meet with. And I had to really work at establishing a relationship with them where they would see me as intelligent and knowledgeable of the Arab world. You know, because in their minds, I should be at home managing the family, and I can't even leave the home without a male minder or without being completely covered in black. So I was a complete anomaly to these guys.
Assad's book, Breaking Cover, My Secret Life in the CIA and What It Taught Me About What's Worth Fighting For, covers how becoming a CIA agent was the last thing on her mind. She didn't even know her eventual role even existed. Then when 9/11 happened, she and her husband knew God had them on the right path.
Here were two committed Christians who were Arabists, pre-positioned to enter the war on terror from the very beginning. Who knew but God?
In her book, Assad wanted to give a realistic view of a CIA undercover counterterrorism officer. She not only describes analyzing sources who were driven by radical, hateful ideology, but also how she surrendered her life to God.
Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when their faith is greater than their fear and intimidation. And it's really to give people the encouragement to do the hard things in life.
The book's final chapters describes life after the CIA, specifically a rescue mission leading a group of persecuted Christians out of Iraq before ISIS terrorists moved into their village.
Miraculously, even though the evacuation almost fell apart on numerous occasions, on December 10th, 2015, we successfully airlifted 149 Iraqi Christians out of northern Iraq to their new homes in Slovakia.
What does Assad hope people take away from her book? A greater understanding of her belief and faith in Jesus Christ, but also how people should never give up, reaching for their goals. Eric Rosales, CBN News, New York City.
Still ahead, one voice. Hear why these pastors are casting denominational differences aside and calling for the church to be unified. In his I Have a Dream speech, Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia." Now a group of pastors are headed to the top of that mountain to do exactly that. Amber Strong has the story.
You've ordained it before the foundation of the earth.
If you take a look around this room, it may seem like your typical prayer meeting.
Flourishing supernatural gifts of the Spirit.
But there's something different about this group.
Baptist, Methodist, non-denom, Church of God in Christ, we've got a big mix.
Pastor Billy Humphrey and preachers like him have thrown denomination aside.
We're saying the same things, and I just look like that's the Spirit of the Lord.
Partnered together for one race, a movement for racial healing.
We believe that God wants to change the testimony in the city of Atlanta, where racism and dead religion has kind of informed and influenced the city.
They're off to a good start. 125 pastors across racial lines have already said, "Count me in." Bishop Garland Hunt is one of them.
More than ever, as opposed to our races coming together, now everyone's blaming each other.
He believes now is the time for the church to lead.
It's not really just political change or policy changes. It has to be a heart change. And the only one who can really fix the heart is Jesus Christ.
Oh, there he is. So they meet every week, praying and fasting. Hunt says changes are already in motion.
We've had meetings where mostly white pastors have come together. So they begin to look around and they had pretty much white groups. They said, well, how can we make an effort to bring blacks in? And sometimes you have to make more than just what's comfortable. You have to make yourself a little uncomfortable.
Humphrey and Hunt are hoping that discomfort sparks friendships.
Okay, guys, well, here we go. We're heading up to the mountain, folks.
In fact, they want to spur 100,000 cross-cultural relationships over the next few months, all leading up to the ultimate day of prayer. The men of One Race say they plan to make the trek all the way to the top of Atlanta's Stone Mountain. But 100 years ago, a different group of men made a similar trek, and for a very different purpose.
From 1915 to 1960, the Ku Klux Klan would go to Stone Mountain, and on top of the mountain they would burn crosses and do their rituals. And so what we feel like we want to do is change that testimony.
Humphrey and Hunt agree it's time for a new narrative for Stone Mountain, Georgia, and beyond.
If the church doesn't take its rightful place and step into that place of authority and set the narrative and deal with these issues, someone else will.
There's really a lot of voices out here. The press gives a voice, a lot of the activists have given voices, but the church has to be a preeminent voice right now in the culture.
They say it's time for the church to be heard. One voice, one people, united together. Amber Strong, CBN News in Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Wow, that's wonderful, the work that's going on there in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Well, stay with us. We have more of CBN NewsWatch on the way. Don't go away. Disney's long-awaited A Wrinkle in Time arrives in theaters across the country today. Ephraim Graham sat down with the cast and brings us a behind-the-scenes look at the movie.
You were a top student, but look at you now. You can't keep using your father's disappearance as an excuse to act out.
Meg is our hero, our heroine, but she's very troubled, and she sees herself as very flawed.
This is our father. Can you help us find him, please?
Your character, Meg, struggles with liking a part of herself and thinking that she's good enough to be loved fully. As a young girl yourself, where do you go to find strength to combat that?
I just feel like it's my support system. My mom, my big sister who I love dearly, like Miss Ava. I feel like I just have a good support system and good peers that help lift each other up and like that lift me up and that really keep me like grounded and confident.
Where are we?
We heard a cry out in the universe.
My father's alive.
We believe he is, and we're here to help you find him. We are in search of warriors.
Warriors who serve the good and the light in the universe.
And what did you see in her that made you want her?
She's a force of nature. This was different than anything that I've made. I haven't made anything for children. This book is for children, and the film is for children. And so to find a girl who I could work with and relate to was my highest hope, and she was an answer to my prayers.
Call me Mrs. Whatsit.
Mrs. who?
No, Mrs. Whatsit.
You three are powerful, strong, confident women. When was the last time you dealt with that struggle of not liking a part of yourself?
Are you kidding? I have that so frequently. I think it's a daily struggle. He's one of the greatest minds in recent history. He's prodigious. But of course, we can't take any credit for our talents. It's how we use them that counts.
I struggle with it all the time. I think that one of the nice things about doing a movie like this, where the central message is to love yourself, is that you can't be someone who's a star of a movie like this and be like, I don't love myself. Like, you have to project that, and so by saying it, you believe it.
Your father's trapped by an evil energy.
It's too strong for our light.
And the only one who can stop it is you.
It's very inspiring, and it has an inspiring message, but it also is a lot of representation in what we really need in this world right now.
My love is always there.
This film addresses that little girl or boy inside of us that's always unsure, that's always a little less confident. It's just reminding them that's a light inside of you, and just let it shine.
If you plan on taking little ones to see A Wrinkle in Time, Plugged In Online brings us this family-friendly review of the film.
You can't keep using your father's disappearance as an excuse to act out.
In the movie A Wrinkle in Time, young Meg Murray has been going through a number of emotional struggles since her NASA scientist father disappeared. He's been missing with no explanation for 4 years now, and she's started lashing out at school and fighting with her classmates. It's gotten so bad that on the anniversary of her father's disappearance, someone sticks a note on her locker that says, "Happy anniversary, if only you'd disappear too."
Is that his work? What's it about?
He believes that we could travel the universe instantaneously.
So you fall to space.
More likely wrinkle it.
You must really miss him.
More than anything in the universe.
But then one evening, Meg and her mom find Meg's little brother chatting cheerily with a strange red-haired woman in their living room. She calls herself Mrs. Whatsit, and she starts talking about Meg's dad and this thing called a tesseract that he spent so much time working on.
He's not coming back, is he?
Don't give up hope. Meg doesn't know it yet, but she's just taken her first step on a galactic-spanning adventure that might well lead to rescuing her dad and saving the universe. This film, based on a beloved children's book, can sometimes feel like a new-agey mishmash that zooms from scene to scene with barely any reason or narrative structure. And frankly, the filmmakers have left out all the best parts of the book. That said, it's a visually stunning pick with positive lessons about living with purpose and pushing against evil with loving choices. So I'll give A Wrinkle in Time a 3 out of 5 for family friendliness. For an in-depth review of this film or anything else at your local box office, check out PluggedIn.com. Plugging you into the movies, I'm Cheryl Wilhelmy for Focus on the Family's Plugged In Movie Review.
Thank you, Cheryl. And you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com. And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. And you can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.